Hi everyone, and welcome to the Computer Shack, where we're going to have a look at another one of my classic computers. Actually, we're going to have a look at a couple of them, and they represent a line of computers that were bought out by IBM in the late 1980s to reclaim its lead in the business market. They're the IBM PS2 range. So let's check them out. IBM. 3 letters of significance in computer history. In 1981, this computing giant had legitimized business microcomputing with its IBM PC. This computer and its subsequent XT and AT models had created an enduring and near-universal standard platform. However, fast forward to 1986, and Big Blue was not happy. This was despite the fact that the PC platform, in its XT or AT iteration, powered by the 8088, 286 or the brand new 386 Intel chips, featuring an industry-accepted 8 or backwardly compatible 16-bit bus and almost universally working under Microsoft's MS-DOS, was the computer for the office. So what was the problem? The problem was most of them did not have those letters IBM on the front. PC clone makers had way more market share than the inventor of the platform, that is, IBM. This rankled the company, who came up with a cunning plan to wrest back control of the business computer market. The scheme was to come up with a series of machines which couldn't be cloned. These computers were the PS2s. The PS2s were bold, distinctive, and modular so technicians could take them apart and assemble them quickly. Their secret unclonable weapon, which could be found on most, but not all of the PS2 models, was the microchannel architecture, or MCA bus. This technology was faster than the existing 16-bit ISA bus and had many other advantages, including a high degree of plug-and-play. The latter was an attractive feature, as adding expansion cards to ISA buses usually meant complex juggling of memory addresses, IRQs and DMAs to prevent conflicts. IBM was happy to license this flash new technology to other parties, but they had to pay a fat royalty fee to IBM for the privilege. Along with the MCA bus, there were other innovations too. New, smaller connectors for the mouse and keyboard, RAM and 72-pin SIM cards, 3.5-inch floppy disk drives, a better UART chip for serial communications, and a new color graphics standard, Video Graphics Array, or VGA. At the same time, IBM, in partnership with Microsoft, was working on a new multitasking operating system, OS2, which, once ready, would further differentiate IBM and the PS2 line from the clone masses. The first PS2 models were released in 1987. Eventually there were a large number of models, ranging from the weird-looking all-in-one Model 25 to high-end servers. Generally, the higher the model number, the more powerful the system. I've got 2 of these models, so let's have a look at these now, but after that I'll revisit the line as a whole and talk about how the PS2 did in the marketplace. So here's the first of my 2 models. This one is a PS2 model 30286. As the name suggests, it's powered by an Intel 286 processor. The original Model 30 looked the same, but had an 8086 processor. I do love the pizza box design of these models, and the small footprint. You can see its standard keyboard, the IBM Model M series here. Footprint of the keyboard is practically as large as that of the computer itself. These clicky keyboards have a great tactile response, and I find them great to type on. I mentioned before in this video the modular design of these units and just how easy they were to disassemble and to get inside. So here's a demonstration. All we need to do with this Model 30286 is to undo a couple of screws at the side here, and once that's done, it's just a matter of taking top of the case, sliding it back a little bit, and it lifts away cleanly so you've got access to the innards. So I'll just zoom around inside and show you some of the features. You can see there the floppy disk and the hard drive sitting side by side. One really curious feature is the way you turn these computers on. You can see that large red switch there, which is quite characteristic of IBM machines, but it's inside and it's attached to the external switch by this rod. So when you turn the computer on, you flick the external switch like that, and this rod manually switches on or turns or moves the internal switch, and so the machine bursts into life. But it's an odd sort of arrangement. Another interesting feature is this riser board you can see in the middle of the machine here, and this actually holds the ISA slots. So this is where you would plug the expansion cards into. It's quite a nifty design in that it allows for the height of the case to be quite small, and that you have these cards arranged in a horizontal configuration rather than vertical as in a standard machine. Here you can see the 4 RAM SIMs plugged into their sockets. We've got 4 megabytes of memory on this computer. There's the floppy disk drive. Strange sort of connection. It's a card edge connection rather than a more conventional type of connector. Another thing I want to show you, something I'm quite proud of. I rejuvenated the flat Dallas battery chip. I modified it to use a button battery. Works well. Coming around the back we can see the power connector, a fan. There's the VGA output there in the middle. Ports for the keyboard and mouse, and down the bottom there RS-232 port, parallel printer port, and above that the ISA slot covers. So let's give it a workout. So we flick the switch. On my machine it's not a big red switch, but I've seen some of these Model 30s that do have a red switch there on the front. My one's white. So like a lot of these machines, it counts up RAM to check that it's okay. As I said, this has got 4 megabytes on board, this one. And then we boot into PC DOS 3.2. So there's our C prompt. Just do a directory listing. Now you can play games on these machines of course, but they were primarily business machines, so I'm not going to show any games. Instead I'll show some editing using a shareware editor, PED. And you can hear there the very definite click sound from that keyboard. It's a distinctive sound. Not sure if I'd like to be in a room with, say, 100 people typing on those keyboards. They're quite noisy, but they do have a great feel to them and very easy to type on. Really just showing you this not only so you could hear the keyboard, but also get an idea of the screen experience under MS-DOS. It was becoming very common in the late 1980s under MS-DOS for the display to consist of these ANSI characters which made up menus, drop-down boxes, and other things you could use with a mouse, but not in a Windows environment as such. One more thing to look at. I've got a benchmarking program here, a QA+, so we'll just run that and see what it says about this particular machine. First thing it does is it goes and looks at what we've got. So there you can see the configuration of our machine, what it has and hasn't got. You can see it's found the 2-button mouse in this case. We've got a 20 megabyte hard drive and a 1.44 megabyte floppy drive. Now the original Model 30 would have had a 720 kilobyte drive. Just have a look at some benchmarks here. CPU speed, video speed, math speed. This is a check of just how fast the system is. Now I'm not a techie, so the video speed doesn't mean too much to me, but I do understand CPU speed, and you can see there it's telling us that we're running at 10 megahertz, which is, for the time, not too bad. It's not the fastest machine in the world, but it would have been adequate for the time. So on now to my second IBM PS2, and this is the Model 70. As you can see, it looks a lot more substantial than the Model 30 286, and indeed it is. It's got more capacity. It's a 386 chip in this one, 386 processor. You can see the design is quite similar though. They all have that PS2 look to them. At the front there you can see the floppy disk drive, but that other bezel next to it you could pop that off and put a second floppy drive in there. So I'll just move around the back and see what's there. And one thing that's there is the lock. Now I didn't mention this on the Model 30, but that had a lock on it also. That was on the side near the front. This one's been moved to the back. If we have a look at other things, we've got our two PS2 connectors for the mouse and keyboard down there. Printer port and RS-232 port. There's our video output all in a line down the bottom there. And there are our three slots, in this case vertical. Now taking this one apart is even easier than taking apart the Model 30. You just need to undo these two thumb screws and that just slides off and you lift it up just like that. Right, so let me just take my camera off the tripod and we'll swing around and have a closer look at this unit. Now one thing I want to point out is the very long PSU, power supply unit, that runs the whole length of the case. Quite thin. Here are the three RAM slots. You can see they're completely full. It's got 6 megabytes of RAM on this particular machine. Here's our floppy drive with the disk in it. It shouldn't be there, so we'll take that out. You can see our battery. Really standard battery. You can still buy these easily at shops. They often batteries you use for cameras. There's a fan on the PSU. You can see where the hard drive is tucked away at the back here. Now let me just move this a little. Not easy to do this when you're holding a camera and you've just got one hand spare. So I'll move it to the side. You can see a bit of the circuit board and you can see the MCA slots there. There are 3 of them. I'll just pan back a bit so you can get an impression of the whole unit. So you can see it's quite compact. It's neatly laid out. It's certainly easy to take apart, as I'll show you in a moment. There are the MCA slots. Moving down a bit, you can see the Intel 386 processor. And there's this little curious device. Now you might be wondering what this is. This is actually a tool that's used to help take the computer apart. The bit that does the business is my thumb's covering it at the moment. That end bit is really just to secure it in place. It's designed to pull the pins out that hold the case together, and you can see some of these pins. If I just move around a little bit, you can see the white pin there at the top. There's another one just below it. And here you can see all the pins on the cage of a disassembled unit. So this is the skeleton, if you like, or the framework that holds all those bits and pieces together. And those pins secure them all. So it is quite easy to take apart. Well, at least it's supposed to be if you know what you're doing, but I want to show you this little clip that I found on YouTube. It's from the Computer Chronicles in 1987, and it features John Dvorak trying to disassemble one of these machines. Now, it's amusing because John Dvorak was a commentator back in those days on PC technology and the industry as a whole. He used to write numerous columns. Certainly had a regular column in InfoWorld. So he was very knowledgeable about computers, but obviously he hadn't practiced opening up an IBM PS2. So let's see how he does.
Most of the components of this machine, if you know what you're doing here, slide out, and things pop out. This is kind of interesting. They've got this.
You sure it pops out?
Yeah, they all pop out. It's just what's interesting about this particular. Gotta get this little button here, you know. Oh, there it is. This is the tool that I didn't use to pop these things out. There's a little tool here, and you can pop out all these little rivets. There's a rivet here. Let me get this thing out of here. Well, anyway,
this really is a kind of a rector set
normally
approach.
A piece
I can see how easy this is to get out.
No, this is real simple to pop out here. We just pop this sucker out here. Well, let's see. Well, normally this thing just pops right out. It's very easy to do. I seem to be missing a...
Well, you can see that John was having trouble. He actually did manage to disassemble the machine eventually, but it does show a golden rule, and that is that if you're going to disassemble something on national television, make sure you practice a few times first so you can do it with aplomb. So, with the cage out of the way, here's a shot of the planer at the bottom. This gives you a better look at those 3 RAM slots and the sticks that are in them. Strange that they only use 3 slots rather than an even number like 4 or 6. Right, so let's fire this one up. I've shortened down the boot up sequence in interest of time, but you can see what's on it. It's OS2 2.1. It doesn't quite match the computer as far as time is concerned. OS2 2.1 came out, was released in 1993, whereas the computer was a few years before that. So it is a little slow on this unit, but I'll show you some of the interface and what it can do. As usual, the flickering here is caused by the camera. It's an artifact of that rather than the screen. Here we can see the boot up screen of OS2, so it's quite sparse. It's a Windows, or graphical user interface rather, Windows type environment, but of course it's not Microsoft Windows. Now this video is not about OS2, it's about the PS2 machine, so all I'm going to do is just boot up a game and show you what the interface looks like. It's a really nice interface to use. It's a typical graphical user interface in that it's quite intuitive. Once you've used a mouse and you know what folders are and clicking and dragging is, you can certainly use OS2 very, very easily. It's quite intuitive. So I've just booted up a game here, just to show you what a chess game looks like when the computer plays itself. So we'll start that off, and you can see some pretty rapid moves taking place. Yeah, it's a nice operating system. I'll talk more about what happened to OS2 at the end of this video. So as usual, finish off the live shots with a look at some manuals. I haven't got a lot of manuals specifically for the PS2 machines, but here's one I've got for the Model 30286, and essentially it's a user manual that shows the user how to set the machines up. As is typical of IBM, it's nicely laid out and well presented. A little less formal actually than the manuals that you used to get with IBM machines back in the, say, early 80s. Those of you watching this video, many of you will know those very distinct looking IBM manuals and their hardback ring-bound manuals and their boxes. They tended to be very dry, fairly technical, whereas this manual's quite readable. Goes through how to set the machine up, slightly less heavy style. Here's a user guide on PC-DOS. Covers all of the major machines, and you can see a use of whimsy in there with our cartoon bird that you can see occasionally on the pages. It's very unlike IBM. As I mentioned before, historically their manuals were pretty dry and pretty technical. So that shows a bit of a change. Finally, I've got this reference card. Pulls out, shows all them MS-DOS commands. PC-DOS, of course, simply being MS-DOS, licensed to IBM. These reference cards are very handy. I used to use them a lot in the day, and certainly much better than easier to use. Once you had a basic feel of DOS, then ploughing through the manual trying to find command syntaxes. This is the one MCA card I've got for the machine. I haven't installed it. It's a SCSI card, and I've got the cables. There's been no real pressing need to get it into the machine, so I haven't had a go at installation yet. But it'll be a project for one day. It'll be interesting to see just how I get on, and to ascertain if it really is as easy as plug and play installing one of these cards. So, just to wrap up, did the PS2 reverse the fortunes of the Clone Wars and put IBM back on the road to world domination? Well, no. While many of the large Fortune 100 companies bought stacks of the machines, IBM never regained the dominance in the PC business market that it had in the early 1980s. IBM's marketing didn't help. For the PC, XT and AT, IBM marketing had used themed advertisements using an actor portraying Charlie Chaplin the little tramp star of the silent movie era. These ads were novel, kind of offbeat and engaging. I liked them. The PS2 marketing was a misfire. IBM came up with the jingle, "How you gonna do it? PS to it," which was as cheesy as Commodore's "Are you keeping up with Commodore" slogan. It was an advertising campaign which would have been more tailored to selling low-end personal computers to the masses, not corporate account managers. It wasn't a good look for a company that prided itself at aiming for the high end of the market. I can't resist showing you parts of the advertising campaign with that little jingle. This is something that's been swiped off YouTube, but it does show you what I'm talking about.
You want to stand with computers that can grow along with you? How are you going to do it? Well, you're going to PS to it with the IBM PS2. You want to network up, network down, share information with other towns. In your business, you got a mission to rise above the competition. How are you going to do it? I'll tell you, you're going to PS to it. The solution is IBM.
Actually, to give the ad its due, it's very catchy. It's now stuck in my head, and I'm going to have to listen to something else to get it out of there. It wasn't just the marketing which led to the failure of the PS2s to dominate, though. When the machines were released, IBM fully expected the market to follow their lead, as it had in 1981. 6 years was a long time in computing in the 1980s, though, and the market had matured considerably. The ISA bus was well established, and although far from being perfect, it was acceptable to most. These PS2 machines are expensive. Industry commentators were lukewarm about their capabilities, and the public seemed happy to keep buying ISA technology with a clone. Manufacturers therefore did not jump to start making MCA machines and paying IBM royalties. Instead, they continued to produce machines with the old ISA bus, simply ignoring IBM's developments. Well, not entirely. Those things that they didn't need to pay royalties for were adopted, such as the 3.5-inch floppy disk drive, RAM on SIMs, the micro connectors for the keyboard and mouse, and other good things like VGA. All these PS2 items became standard on clone machines. IBM failed then to take the market with them. Their dominance in the personal computer industry was over. If anything, the most dominant personal computer technology company at the end of the 1980s was not in hardware at all. It was the software company Microsoft, whose operating system now ran a huge percentage of the world's microcomputers. Microsoft also had a role in the stagnation of OS/2 and its eventual market failure. Recall that initially IBM and Microsoft were partners in this enterprise. However, once Microsoft seriously started to work on its own multitasking operating system, Windows, it went from being partner to competitor. We all know who won that battle. So, the PS2s did not set the market alight. They are of historical interest though, and I'm glad I've got a couple of models in my collection. Well, I hope you enjoyed that look at the IBM PS2. Well, that's it for today, so until next time, as usual, keep well, and we'll see you in the next video.